media coverage equates to traction for their business. If you build it, they will come circumstance. If we could just get coverage in publication X, then ... Y will happen. You should not approach your marketing initiatives any differently from your PR initiatives, because the real truth of it is like pitching to journalists is a form of inbound marketing. You are trying to create interesting content that draws back people to you. And that could be on your own channels, or it could be convincing a journalist. Think of the Globe and Mail example. Everyone would love Sean Silikoff to write a story about their company, right? He's the biggest named tech reporter probably in Canada. There are other reporters at the Globe and Mail that are very, very new, that don't have that level of profile, that are, not being inundated with a couple hundred pitches a day, that would love to build up their portfolio and their career and would write the shit out of that story if you gave them the time and opportunity.
Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Well, dude, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
So you're, the editor-in-chief at Betakit, and you're just telling me you're the founder of Betakit Incorporated, but not Betakit the publication. So we're starting off in a really confusing way because I'm like, what does that even mean? So maybe just walk us through a story, even just for context of like that kind of history of Betakit and, what Betakit is for those. I mean, within Canada, anybody in the startup ecosystem knows Betakit, but outside Canada, many might not.
Yeah, this shows that I'm truly legit because it's a messy origin story like every other startup. Betakit is the publication of record for Canadian tech and startups. For a broader North American audience, you can consider us Canadian TechCrunch if that helps make it easier for you. And like most startup origin stories, we've got some real up and downs. And like most, I think media companies, we have a lot of failures before we've kind of hit like product market fit now. So I'm the founder of Betakit Incorporated, which is the company that now owns the publication. I didn't found the publication. That was founded by Sarah Prevet in 2012 after Postmedia, which is a Canadian media chain, bought her entrepreneurship-focused social network Sprouter. And they're like, hey, you should launch a startup-focused imprint within the Postmedia network. And that was called Betakit. They were Canadian-based and globally focused. So they were covering world startup news. And they had a crack team of people you might recognize in terms of Aaron Burry or Daryl Etherington, who went on to TechCrunch and now working at Omer's Ventures. Crazily enough, the media space is weird. They punched way above their weight for an incredibly small team and had zero support from Postmedia. So they were shut down after a year because Postmedia was like, hey, you're not making any money. And Betakit was like, well, isn't that your job to monetize our work? We're just doing the journalism. So it was shut down. And then in 2013, it was bought back. It was shut down in 2013 and then bought back by one Ian Hardy, who at the time was the owner of Mobile Syrup, which was like, let's say, again, for your audience, Canadian Engadget, Canadian-focused consumer tech publication. And he recognized that it'd be really great to have a business tech counterpart beside all the phone reviews and stuff. It relaunched as Canadian-based, Canadian Focus. I got involved around 2014, took over as managing editor, and then we spun it out as its own company February 26, 2016. So it's now been 8+ years of Betakit Incorporated. I think all of the different iterations that Betakit had gone through to find where we are now is like a good reflection of like all businesses, whether you consider yourself a startup, have to go through these evolutions of finding like right product market fit, like right delivery for your audience, proper monetization strategy and all that stuff. But I mostly speak to that to make sure that no one ever assumes that I am the founder of this thing, but I feel like I am the steward carrying on like a legacy and a responsibility of those who came before me.
Appreciate kind of that context. So today we're going like very tactical in the world of PR, which, as we were talking about earlier, is kind of these things that I think founders either like don't care at all about or care way too much about it. It's kind of hard to find that sweet middle where you use it kind of as a weapon in the right place, right time. You've been now in like the absolute nucleus of, let's say, PR and startups for like over a decade. And so I think you've seen everything that can go right and probably everything that can go wrong as well. So, you have built some, I mean, I guess you've talked about this topic, a lot, and you have a lot of examples. So we'll dig into all of that. But I guess let's start like at the kind of high level, like what are the 101s of media, of PR, maybe some high level thoughts, and then we'll kind of tangent off from that.
I'll even go like you're making me feel really sad because it's my birthday tomorrow, and it's
shit.
It's not
happy almost birthday.
It's 2 decades. I've been 2 decades of doing this stuff because prior to Betakit, I was doing marketing communications and like PR stuff for either Canadian startups or at that time Canada's largest tech company, BlackBerry. In addition to like other tech blogging stuff. So. And I only say that just to let people know if they're like, oh, okay, here's this journalist guy going to tell us what we're doing wrong. It's like, I have been on the other side of this. I used to pitch stories to Betakit before I ran it.
Nice.
And I understand what it's like when I think you accurately said they either care about this stuff too much or not at all. And it's because in Canada specifically, a lot of founders, they might get advice on their fundraising, product development, go-to-market strategy. And then the media thing is this weird thing off in the corner that they don't 100%. Have a lot of mentors and advisors for, and they like either like poke at it with a stick or they completely ignore it. And part of the reasons why I spend time on this for Betakit, like it's beneficial for us if we have companies that understand how to engage with us, but it's my give back to the ecosystem to like help them navigate this stuff. So founders don't know how to engage with this stuff, and they often don't get guidance through whatever support programs that they currently have for other mechanisms. And it leads them to have like really weird misconceptions about what this stuff is in service of. And I think the biggest one off the top is that like media coverage equates to traction for their business. Like if like it's the if you build it, they will come circumstance. If we could just get coverage in publication X, then ... Y will happen. And it doesn't really matter what they want to have happen from Y, whether it's like a funding round, customers, love and affection from the masses or whatever. The important thing is that equation is the ... because they can never actually directly connect how the action will achieve the result, right? Traction comes from a great product, comes from sales, comes from customers that love your product. It does not necessarily come from media attention, and it certainly won't if you just assume that it will naturally come from that. If you're not doing some of the...
It's funny you say that, right? Because I remember back like as a first-time founder, I guess like right around that, like we're talking 2013, 2014, and there was just so much like importance associated. For us, it was like the Ottawa Business Journal, right? Like we were in Ottawa. Like it's like OBJ, man. Like making the front page OBJ. That was like, dude, we've made it, right? And like,
now, did anyone tell you, other than sending it to your parents, did anyone tell you why getting coverage in a paywalled local?
My parents framed it, but besides that, yeah, no, I don't know that much. Like, came from it. It just felt like a big deal, like something we had to do.
Felt like something you had to do. Felt like something you probably spent a lot of time on with limited returns. And here's the difficulty, right? So if media attention doesn't get you anything other than like some mom and dad love, because it means they might not understand your company, but they know like, oh, well, like the Ottawa Business Journal wrote about, these guys must be onto something. Like for the time, like the decade that I wrote about BlackBerry and worked at BlackBerry, I think my parents thought that I made the phones by hand myself. Like they didn't understand this stuff, right? The problem with this is if you have real problems with your business, if you actually have problems with traction, if you are burning too hot, if your runway is short, if your board hates you, if your technical co-founder just left, not only will pursuing that OBJ coverage not help solve those problems, because you are putting time and attention into it, you're expediting the death of your business. And that's like just the first place I like to start with is I try to give founders an operational lens to see their approach to media. And I'm going to say broadly storytelling. So they know where to slot it in, how much emphasis to put on it, and like when to friggin' ignore it. Because I know for me as a founder, getting permission to ignore things, even if it's just for the future, allows me to focus on the stuff that's really, really important. And that decision paralysis of like, oh, we could do this. What about this? My lead VC really wants some media coverage, blah, 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 blah. All of those things go out the window and you can just lock in on executing. So I really like starting here because I've seen a number of companies desperate for coverage in the hopes that it's going to Hail Mary save their company. And there are a lot of other things that you can do before getting a journalist to write about you if you're desperately trying to save your company.
Well, can I even ask that? Like, what is it even going to do? Like, sometimes I'm a little jaded on the announcements. I actually like it on the receiving end as a consumer of this information to know who's raised and how much and these sort of things. But I do sometimes wonder, like, for the startups announcing their seed round, their Series A, what does it actually do? And maybe the bigger question is like, what's a strategy where that actually makes sense and is something you should pursue? Like, how should you think about it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that like early stage startup kind of PR and media attention can get you. Awareness is a huge thing. Like the number of times that we've heard media coverage has helped close around a Betakit, help get first interns or hires in, things like that is pretty common. It's not just because like I think Betakit is awesome. That doesn't happen because Betakit is awesome. It happens because if you're an early stage company and you bought whatever domain that you could get in 2024, they're very limited ones, and no one can find you on the internet. When they search your name and a site of authority shows up, so that one, they can just see information about your company, but like two, hopefully there's some positivity there, showcasing that you've launched your product, you've raised around things like that. That can add a lot of value. Just like getting your name out has some core intrinsic value. It can help with lead gen. It can help you get customers if you understand how, and I'm assuming we're probably going to dig into that. But at this point, it's just like positioning. It's allowing you to establish what your story is, or trawl on the backs of larger stories, right? And you see this all the time where there's like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the Super Bowl, right now, every AI story, things like that. There are larger narratives that are happening in the media environment that your company might be able to take advantage of before you're necessarily ready. It's like, it's part of the reason why we all know about like Epsilera, whereas prior to COVID, no one would have known that company's name. There was like a global health crisis going on, and all of a sudden, all these biotech companies were suddenly being profiled on the regular. There are larger narratives that are like giant boats in the water that you can trawl behind and make your journey a little bit easier. But those are kind of the core three. I would say in terms of like audiences that you're trying to reach with that stuff, it's usually like VC investors, right? You go to business and tech press to get in front of the people that are going to lead your next round. It's about hiring. It's about, again, from that awareness perspective, trying to make sure that the people know that that you have money to hire them, two, you're a great place to work and you're doing some interesting things. And then it can be customers. But all of this is reflected in an exercise that most founders do in other lenses, but don't apply it to media. Like everyone does a customer profiling exercise, right? You understand like who your customers are, where you try to reach them, what they care about, what they don't care about, stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, when you're trying to do like any sort of media stuff, you don't think about the audience you're trying to reach, what channel you can reach those audiences on, and then what aspect of your company, like what story you're trying to tell them that works on that channel to like convince that audience. They're just like, let me go to the Globe and Mail. Let me go to the New York Times. Let me go to OBJ, biggest established brand name. And then that will waterfall down somehow to the person I'm trying to reach. Whereas depending upon your objectives for your company at stage you're at, a Discord server, a Slack channel, a newsletter, an in-person meetup could be way more impactful to actually like converting on your goals as a business. And this is usually the point where like people realize that I've Jedi mind tricked them to talk about their overall like media strategy, that this just isn't a PR thing. It can be like your marketing efforts and stuff like that. These are just different stories and channels that you're optimizing for, but it should all be considered as part of one portfolio, right? And I don't know, but like for you, like were you I'm sure you were super locked into your target customer, what they like to read. Were they an Apple or Android person? You know, do they like to get a pump in the morning? Do they like get one in the afternoon? What, how many grams of protein are they taking? And then you're like, yeah, they're probably reading OBJ.
Yeah, that's right. It's right. I mean, but it becomes 100% around like what you said earlier. Like, what's the biggest? I honestly would almost say like my really simple way of thinking about media, especially back then. And now I'm almost like, I don't even have an opinion on this thing. Like, I realize I know so little about it. I almost like throw my hands up, right? But like back then, it was like media is hype. Like, that's it. Media is just hype. So like, what's going to give me the biggest hype? Like the New York Times will give me bigger hype than the Globe and Mail, which give me bigger hype. The OBJ will give me bigger hype than, you know, and it just goes down that chain. And I'm just like, the hypest thing, if I can get on TechCrunch, I'm the shit. Because like I'm on TechCrunch, like that's hype. It doesn't, you know, I don't know what it leads to. It probably doesn't lead to anything. And that was the stupid way of like thinking about it. So I guess I'm curious, like, you mentioned a few things there, which I thought made compelling. One is around media profiling, and then the other one's around finding bigger narratives and finding like stories you can tell that are more than just we raised a round or maybe like we launched a new product, which tend to be the two like classic go-tos, I would say. Do you have some examples of some companies that did either of those things right? And you can either name the company or not, but like really, so we can go rich and detailed on like the examples, like a specific narrative that some company latched onto, or like how to really do the media profiling and the sort of things you might say on different channels for it to actually drive something.
Yeah. I'm a little wary to like highlight specific companies that do it well, because that's where probably like, all of the stuff that I do kind of behind the scenes or in like we do these office hours or like just like media programs for the benefit of the ecosystem. A little separate from me like commenting on like, man, this company really pitched us really well. I want to make sure that we maintain our independence and our credibility there. But I will say, talking through this, the companies that are like let's take the opposite of your approach of just like chasing hype, chasing trajectory. What would it look like if you were doing the exact same customer profile exercise, but applying it to a media lens? You're asking 3 questions. Who am I trying to reach? Where am I trying to reach them? And then how am I going to reach them? And that's both like the tactical execution of like what's the work back schedule? What aspect of our company story we're trying to tell them that's going to convince? And you can easily see how this thing that would be just for your customers can be like, well, pretty sure we're going to be telling a different story to our potential investors from our customers. And it's definitely going to be a different story to people that we're trying to hire. And it's simply a matter of like, when you go to execute that, you start with the audience first, because when it comes to channels that they want to be reached on, what they like or don't like about your company, like assuming that the VC is going to be more interested on total addressable market, business traction, leadership team, velocity. Employees might be more interested on company values. Is it a great place to work? Like what attracted other people there? And then your customers are like, are you better, faster, cheaper, right? If you are struggling to articulate any of that, or maybe find the channel, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it is a Betakit, whether it is, whatever hype beast media publication you're hoping is the biggest, or if it's like straight up, just like some micro-targeted newsletter or Facebook Messenger group because you're running a 2-sided marketplace and that's where all your people are trying to reach. I can't answer the specifics of those for you because I don't know your business. But what I can tell you is, much like when you do customer profiling, if you ever want to know the answers to those questions, you go back and you talk to your target audience. The reason why you start with your audience first is that you don't have to guess on that other stuff. You ask them like, hey, are you actually reading Betakit? Are you reading Stratechery? Are you just like on TikTok memeing every day? It's blown my mind seeing companies across Canada. Like, do you know that there's like a farmer TikTok? There are ag tech companies across Canada that like, oh, when we sell through our stuff, we've got to get on farmer TikTok because it's all of these like 65 and up generational farmers who only want that peer-to-peer kind of analysis and evaluation from a farmer that looks like them. But they all glommed on to like TikTok because they love showing videos of their tractors and stuff. If we can attack that market and sell through to one, we're going to just like roll through this demographic. I would have never have known that. But I know that if you go through this process of starting through your target audience and figuring out kind of like where they want to be reached and how they want to be reached, you don't have to guess. Does that kind of connect? Like because
I think that helps, and that's like a high level kind of marketing strategy that I think you have to do to understand which channels you can go after. The question I have though is when it comes to like traditional media, like getting somebody, it doesn't have to be traditional. It's actually just getting somebody else to write about you. Because if you're talking any social media channel or even a newsletter, maybe less so, but like Slack, anything where you control and it's user generated, you can decide like, okay, let's talk about this, let's talk about that, whatever. But like when you need to get somebody else to write about you, whether it's a newsletter or, a Betakit or whatever, you need a story. Like you need something. Like what are the sort of things you can even as a startup, and we're always talking here like early stage startups, 0 to Series A, like this is kind of the stage. Like what are the sort of things you can actually get them to talk about? Or is it really mainly just like you raise a round or big product launch?
No, there's way more stuff that companies don't even take advantage of because they take it for granted or don't consider it. So I can dig in through like what maybe like for any early stage startup, the stories that will be available for them, and they can prioritize and assign based upon value. But I just want to say, like, you nailed something kind of implicitly right there that's even way more important. I'm not talking about PR. I'm broadly talking about marketing. You should not approach your marketing initiatives any differently from your PR initiatives, because the real truth of it is, like, pitching to journalists is a form of inbound marketing. You are trying to create interesting content that draws back people to you. And that could be on your own channels, or it could be convincing a journalist. Like, most PR people, most journalists wouldn't consider that to be inbound marketing, but like inbound marketer and marketers in general don't care where that attention comes from. They're different channels to optimize for. And when we go back to like founders spending too much time on this or not enough time, it's like, hey, why did you get your one junior marketing hire to spend a full quarter trying to pitch an op-ed in the Globe and Mail or get Kara Swisher to write about you, instead of improving the conversion funnel of your landing page? And this is where it gets to, if you don't see these as like responsibilities that you need to prioritize, you will have these very capable people doing things that don't really like matter to the business in that moment. So I just want to even like just acknowledge that. Like,
I think it's a great point, and it actually goes back. I think the way I saw, like, not solve for that, but the way that I see that happening is that you forget that it all comes back to the same thing. Like, it's all traction, it's all leads. Like, that's the thing that you care about. And then when you kind of go off like the rail and you start caring a little bit about like the ego stuff, the hype, that's when you spend a quarter chasing an op-ed, or like get super hyped up about making the front page of some like bigger publication that gets you a lot of props and like zero customers. But when you just say, like, at the end of the day, I need like SQLs, I need MQLs, like that's just what I need, then it becomes a little bit more like, okay, this channel's actually going to drive that. This one's not. Like, should I spend that much more time here versus that one? Like, what in your experience works really well and just like increases the odds that the people that, you know, journalists like that will cover you?
Well, let's even break that down and extend it, because I can, even agnostic of the company, I can probably expand the breadth of people you might want to be reaching out to, right? If you like, because when you raise a round of funding, one of your target audiences are like, if say you raise your seed round, who might you wanting to be reached with that news? People who are gonna lead your A, right? What publications do they read? They read business and tech press, right? So like across North America, Betakit and TechCrunch are two easy ones. So it behooves you to announce that information in a place where those people will see it, so you can get on the board with getting them in the funnel for your A round. Also, there are tons of people that read that stuff to see where their next job might be. So you're also targeting potential hiring candidates, right? Especially if you're in the AI space and it's just like an open arms race in terms of like financing, even down to like who's got the chips, right? This is why you see, it wasn't Sequoia, it was Andreessen Horowitz just announcing they're just going to make like X hundreds of millions of dollars worth of compute available to their portfolio companies. Are they doing that out of the kindness of their heart? No, they're doing it, one, to support the success of those companies, but it's a major recruiting tactic for any deals that they're trying to get in the future, right? They're just leveraging their muscle. But it's probably a situation that your customers are not reading Betakit or TechCrunch or like the business tech press unless you sell into that. Like a lot of people, Simple stories are popular on Betakit, not only because Simple is like a prominent Canadian fintech, but a lot of our demographic are Simple customers because they're looking for like optionality when it comes to financial solutions. So we often see those companies that are pitching us as like verticalized tech and business press, they're going to some other kind of trade publication or focus publication in their space that like are where their customers live. And that could be like aerospace, ag tech. I think of any target vertical that you're in, there are usually a couple publications like that. They're like the Betakit for fintech, the Betakit for ag tech, things like that, where they want to tell a similar story, but targeted for that audience, which is probably like customers, right? People that are reading that to stay up on new services and ideas. So just thinking that you nailed the checkbox of like, we raised around, we got the tech press. You're not really thinking through like the value that you can extract from that moment. Similarly, I always give the example of like, if the CBC and Betakit write the exact same story, what do the headlines look like? And a Betakit story would be like, Company X raises Y millions of dollars to do Z in whatever space. what is the CBC story going to look like? This company has a new solution helping Canadians with their healthcare problems. They won't even mention the company. They don't care. Why? Because the CBC, as a general media publication, wants to frame stories that their audience wants to read, like solving their everyday problems. You could say that stuff happened through magic. It doesn't matter that it came through a startup. The company's name is going to be somewhere in that story, but they're not leading with that.
And is that your job as a founder when you pitch, when you reach out to frame it, reframe it, thinking about how they might do that, or is that on them?
Great question. I'll say it's really important to note, like, I said before that when you're pitching to media, this is like kind of like a digital marketing, inbound marketing activity. The real difference, the super important caveat, is that this is a marketing activity you don't control. These are you're going with intermediaries, gatekeepers. You're trying to convince them to get that content out into the system for your benefit. Very different than if you're like publishing on your own social channels or your website or something like that. So I would say that the more that you can do to make it easier for them for that to click in, the better. But you have to understand, like, they're gonna have their own take on it, their own spin on it. That's kind of the conversations with journalists aren't conversations, they're interviews. You're kind of entering into the arena and you have to be prepared for that. But there's a lot of specific things we can dig into, like pitching journalists, how that might go.
I think that's really what I want to go deep on now, because I think we understand in general, like, I think what I understand right now talking to you is, like, first of all, PR is a small part of the bigger marketing thing and you shouldn't think about it any differently. Then the second thing is, within PR and getting other people to write about you, you kind of want to have, like, whatever story you have, like, think about it more broadly and understand where else that story might be able to fit versus just like the tech press stuff that, everybody knows about.
And if you're unsure, go talk to the target audience you're trying to reach, and they're going to tell you where they read and where they get information. You're not going to have to guess, right?
And so once you know that, now the question is, okay, how do I make it happen? Like, how do I actually get people to write about me, whether it's Betakit or TechCrunch or something more specific to, like, your target customer?
So if you know who you're trying to, like, if you're like, okay, we've got this funding round, we think we can hit some VCs, some customers, and some maybe we use this as a recruiting tool. We're gonna try and target 3 audiences with these news, and then we have some specific channels for each that they've said they all read and would really make sense. And just because we're in the industry, we pay attention. We know these are some good places. Now you've got to match. This is the how part. This is like, how do you actually, like, convince the journos to cover you? But then also, like, what aspect of your story, right? You had asked us before, what are some of the stories that are accessible? You have your origin story. Like, what was the founder moment where you flipped the table and said, fuck it, I'm building this. Someone needs to solve this problem. There's a great company in Canada called Willful. They're trying to make it super easy for every Canadian to have a digital will and kind of like end of life planning. And it came about because the founder was, like, caught on a highway in, like, traffic, like complete car jam, and, like, someone was having a health incident, and they were sitting there being like, what if that was me? What if that was my circumstance? I would, like, my partner would have, they wouldn't even have, like, one password login to, like, cancel our phone plan and stuff like that, right? Every company has that origin story, which can be incredibly powerful to some of these audiences. There's your company values. How are you different? What do you care about? Is it in, like, are you a clean tech company? Is it like how you work? Is it how you treat your employees? Maybe your only value is making a profit, right? Those are generally appealing to different audiences, but you can lean in on, like, what makes you different in that way.
Can I, by the way, this is a little tangent, but can I put you really on the spot? Like, could I tell you about one of my portfolio companies that I'm sure would probably be comfortable, and then we can, like, be like, okay, this is what, let's say you were, like, hired, like, you're
sure, portfolio company, man. Yeah, let's, like, work through it. Yeah,
cool.
Totally.
So, and it's also one that would make sense to a lot of people because it's like, it's not, like, a complicated thing to get. So, a company called Roam.auto, and they do, like, car subscriptions. So they sit in between, like, if you want to get a car for a day or a car for a week, you're on vacation, these sort of things, you go to, like, Hertz, you go to Avis, maybe get around, right? If you want to, like, have your own car for a long time, you're committed, you either buy a car, you lease it, you finance it, that's like 2-3 years. But if you want a car for a few months, maybe you just need a car for the summer, or maybe you move to a new city, you're not sure where you're going to work yet, but you want to have, like, a car accessible every day, or you just got a new job, these sort of things, you go to Roam and you get a car, you subscribe to a car for 3 months, 6 months, a year, these sort of timeframes. And by the way, just for what it's worth, like, they also have an enterprise angle. So if you're, like, A big movie production is like one area, but there's a lot of different businesses you wouldn't know that actually have fleets of cars. They don't necessarily want to buy them. So they might work with a Hertz or an Enterprise, or they might work with a Rome to get like 50 cars, 100 cars, like imagine for a movie production, these sort of things.
Yep.
The consumer one is probably the ones that's like cleanest to go after. But let's just say they're like, they're always marketing, right? And especially on the consumer side, they're always marketing. They're doing social. They're doing a bunch of different things. So let's say they want to like, we should have more of a PR strategy. Like we should get more people to write about us. How would you start? I don't expect you to just have the answers on the spot, but like walk me through how you might start thinking about this stuff.
No, I can kind of match this to fit, right? Like, and just based upon like the small details of what you told me, I'm going to make from experience some assumptions on like what's going on there. But, you had even said, okay, they've got this general consumer story, blah, blah, blah. That's usually like the hardest one to nail, right? That because when they're doing something like that, that product story has to be one of that, put yourself in the eyes of your customers, right? Did you just move to this new town? You need access to a vehicle occasionally. You're not willing to buy something that commit like that is a customer focused story, right? For those customers. You could have something similar where like maybe you're leveraging customer testimonials where they're talking about like how much time this saved them, how worried they were about, they're in a new city. They don't really know the transit system, things like that. All of that stuff. You can easily see how you flip the lens from you telling the story about what those customers are going through to allowing customers the opportunity to tell those stories. And depending upon the publication and who those customers are, they might be more interested. Now, you also back channeled, of course, they've got this enterprise model because that's how they're moving units and they have long-term agreements, better unit economics, things like that.
That's right.
What publication might be interested in like how you're making money? Does the CBC really care that you've got this enterprise solution for like the film industry? Or are they like, new solution in the province of BC to help people who don't have cars? That is the prototypical CBC story of like, here's this thing, who cares where it came from? Here's how it helps our readers because they want to know that. Business reporter at Bloomberg, Globe and Mail, Betakit, TechCrunch, be like, what enterprise deals are you signing with specific industries? How many units are you moving? How much money are you making? Logistically, can you handle this stuff? Like that is the business element of your company story that they're going to be way more interested in than like, oh, poor Sally moved to a new city and she doesn't know how to get a vehicle. Like that's, if you're pitching that story, they're going to be like, okay, well then show me that you're doing this well. Where does that type of story best fit? Those publications where your target audience of like VCs are reading. Similarly, if you have targeted certain industry verticals where it's like film industry and stuff like that, are there any like film, television, trade publications where you might be able to pitch a story and be like, yo, is your studio like tired of using Teamsters to like ship your staff back and forth? We've got the solution for you. And
then logistically, like let's take the CBC as an example. Like how would they go out? Like, do they got to figure out like who in the CBC might write about this and then like create a whole story for them? Like how specific should they get if that's one of their like many goals?
Okay, let's go back to the idea of like channels, right? And we're thinking like any channel, any digital space online has two things: rules to that space and then gatekeepers that enforce those rules. Have you ever been kicked out of like a subreddit or an ICQ group? You know what that's like, right?
Yeah.
In a media environment, that's both the publication itself, right? Because they curate specific types of news. Even like CBC, which is a general interest publication, has specific sections and segments for politics, local news, stuff like that, right? Betakit, as much as it pains me, doesn't write about sports, right? So our audience is coming because they know that we're presenting a certain type of news and we're ignoring the rest of it. Additionally, you have those individual journalists and editors that you've got to pitch and convince to tell the story, right? If you are pitching health tech stories to the fintech reporter, are you putting that information in front of the right person? And if we go back to the media profiling I was talking about before, where you start with the audience you're trying to reach, the channel, and then like that how, if you've got the right publication, the right channel that you want to reach, well, you should dig in. The publication usually tells you how to pitch them, what they're looking for to pitch. If you're in the crypto space, you look at a publication like CoinDesk, they specifically tell you how not to pitch them because there's like so many rampant opportunities for fraud that they're like, do not pitch individual journalists, send this through our centralized thing so we can make sure there's no like pump and dump situation. But every individual journalist at a publication on their social profiles are either like implicitly or explicitly telling you what they're interested in, what they're not interested in, how to reach them. They're so inundated with people that are just like shotgun sending them pitches that aren't targeted to them at all, they are more than likely willing to take the time to help you triangulate or find the right place if you show any amount of effort. Even if it's a quick email saying, hey, you might not know us. We're a company in this space. You've written about similar companies. We read your stuff. We think we might be a fit for you, but we wanted to check and see like what you're working on right now, if this is of interest, if there's specific things that we need to do to make that happen. It's the reason why Betakit has office hours. We just give time away every week as an open door policy for like founders to come in and just hype check on stories, what we're interested in that. We want to make it as easy as possible.
And do you find like reaching out that way cold? Like what should you expect? Because sometimes I think to myself, even if I find the right, like at a big, big, like something like CVC, which is like they report on so many different things. I think with Betakit, you kind of know like if I have this kind of story, somebody will probably, should answer me because like I'm going like right. And I think that'll be the same for more like trade publications where you're like, I'm selling act to act because like they probably answer me. But like you go after the CVC, they write about everything. What should you expect? They'll answer you if you think about it, or you got to do like 10, 20 of these to get like one person and be like, oh yeah, maybe I'll write about you.
Within that in the CBC, you've got to find the right like segment of the publication and often geography, right? Like think of the car company example you were given before. Maybe they're expanding to a new market. You could probably find the local people on the municipal beat in cities in which you're launching and pitch them in a very targeted fashion rather than being like, dear Mr. CBC, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you've and again, this is work, but isn't this work like preparatory work so much better than just guessing or throwing stuff out there, never hearing back, and then wondering what happened? Now, similarly to your question of like what you're trying to get out of it up front, I'm going to give you like the easiest example here is like, let's compare this to VC pitch, right? Because that's the one thing that every founder is willing to put, like, whether it's your fundraising pitch or your sales pitch, they are constantly working on it. They're constantly iterating it. They're constantly adapting it. If you're not doing the same for your media pitch, like are you treating this the same way? So if you were to email a bunch of VCs cold and say, yo, we would like you to invest in us by this time next week. We're this company. We're really fucking awesome. Here's a PDF of our basic level information or a Google Drive. Please contact us for wiring information. It's like, that's not
unlikely.
This is you profile the people that you want to meet, and you might cold pitch YOLO that. I would never stop a founder. Like part of the founder value proposition is the fearlessness to just go
the ethos.
And just
right. That's
fire
right.
it off. Right. What I'm saying is like set yourself up for success by making sure that like, it's not just luck, but you are skill shooting that in. So it's like, in much the same way you might be like, hey, we know you've invested in companies like this. We have an amazing company. I would love a coffee to let you know 15 minutes of how this is working. Like that easy to convert ask that leads to the relationship that leads to the round. Or you're going warm intro. You've already got an investor and they're trying to secure someone else. Maybe it's a repeat founder that was invested in by that person who'd be like, oh my God, so-and-so VC would love this person. You don't know them. Let me make them to connect. There's been a little bit of like vetting that's happening there because you're by proxy getting someone else to let you know like, okay, this person is interested in this stuff. You seem to be the right fit. And usually those warm intros are mutual opt-in. The introducer sends a private email saying, hey, is it okay if I connect you with this person? They're doing blah, 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 blah. They say yes, and then you're connected. Same thing happens in the media space. We're also human beings. Send us an email being like, hey, Betakit, we're a company in this space. We know you cover Canadian startups. We're a Canadian startup. We have some upcoming news. We would love to share that with you. Can you give us any feedback on the best way to do that? We're happy to schedule a call, send more information on email. Love to grab a coffee if you're local, buy you a muffin or something like that. That's really easy to either move forward or course correct as a journalist. What isn't easy or automatically gets archived is, hey, we have we're this PR agency. We have this major executive announcement coming for something that you'd never covered before, would never be interested in covering, but we're getting paid to send this to you. And we're going to send this, put this in your inbox, fully throated pitch without you ever like indicating you're interested. And then we are going to follow up 3 more times that week and leave 2 voicemails because we are under the pressure of having to do this, right? Which do you think is going to be more successful? Is that how you approach securing lead investors for your funding round? Why would you expect it to work for BD attention?
Well, listen, Doug, I mean, we'll stop it there. I mean, I guess my last question for you is there anything that, I mean, there's many things we haven't covered, but anything that's like really top of mind that you think we should have covered that we haven't covered?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And like, if your audience found this valuable, I would be more than happy to like come back and do something super focused where we just get like, it's all detailed in the weeds. I lean more to the framing thing because if I can give founders an operational framework, they can fill in that detail later. But if they don't know where to put it, it's a real struggle. I will also say that like for companies that might be hearing this, we offer up these sessions and office hours to a variety of companies across Canada through our Innovation Leaders program. So if you've got an investor, you're part of an incubator and accelerator across Canada, you might already have access to these and we can like go through it in more detail. But I think high level, what I'm really trying to do here is to scare founders into taking this stuff seriously, understanding that it's set from knowing operationally what your goals are and then how you might be using storytelling to execute. And then everything else is preparation. At this stage, all you really need to do is take your best, most impactful story, your juiciest, lowest hanging fruit target audience, and the most like accessible channel to you, saturate the hell out of that, learn, and then iterate. Companies like Wealthsimple, companies like Shopify can tell multiple stories to multiple channels, to multiple audiences all at the same time because they have teams of people all dedicated to executing on that, right? If you are listening to this podcast, you probably don't have those resources. Lowest hanging fruit, biggest return for smallest amount of impact, execute, learn, and iterate.
I love by the way, like the idea of finding that juicy story and kind of retelling it, because I think you tell me actually, but I feel like there's some stories that are really time sensitive. Like I raised a round. You're not going to cover a fundraise that happened a month ago. If it's already been covered, it's kind of a dead story. But if you have like kind of like the origin story is an example of this, but other stories like that about a specific, and I'm a founder and I just know like these are the stories when I tell them, it just really resonates. Then you could just keep telling that story over and over again, like through different channels in different publications. I assume people would write about it.
Two things here I want to close on because we kind of brushed upon this and then we went down another route. But like, yes, 100%. You don't have to remake the story. What is the version of that story for social media? What is the version of that story in long form? What is it like? Can you do some like rich media stuff? What is the GIF meme version of that story? What is the 1 hour keynote talk at a major tech event version? Like you can tell the same story over and over and over again in different formats. And you're going to be reaching different audiences or highlighting different aspects. Don't reinvent the wheel, man. Like use everything on the animal, like saturate the value of it. The second thing there that I want to talk about when we just noted all the different types of stories that are available to founders. And I'll just give it again, like your origin story, your company values, your thought leadership, customer stories, both by customers and for customers, your product story, your employee story is do not take for granted because you know this stuff that it isn't interesting. I feel my job as a journalist is to be professionally interested in the space that I'm covering. And I approach it that way. Because you're showing up every day building your company, you're taking for granted how far you've come, the cool, great, smart people on your team, the cool shit that you're building. And there are so many companies, particularly in Canada, that work in like highly technical, highly regulated spaces that are very, very complex, that concede defeat on ever trying to explain to people why that's really cool. When if they would just lean in a bit, and if you can make it clear to them why you care, why you're passionate, why this matters, they're on board. I gave the example of Willful earlier. It's literally a company that deals in death tech. And you will see that their co-founding team, one of whom is the former managing editor of the original version of Betakit. She has op-eds everywhere. She gets media appearances. She does keynote speaking. And she's talking about death and wills all the time. And if you can make that palatable to a large degree of audiences, don't concede defeat on your like life biotech company or your like boardroom software that helps governance or things like that. Like show people why you care. Make sure that you're like focusing on the customer and their problems, the good and interesting characters within the company and your customers who you're servicing. Like, put a human face on this stuff and people will lean in. Sorry. Obviously, it's clear that like I get up on this stuff. I like stories. I like telling stories. I like consuming stories. I like helping founders figure their shit out because it's really, really hard to build a company. And these things seem like really small things, but they could be the thing that leads you to, ultimate success. So hopefully this is helpful, man. And if your audience digs it, I'd love to go back and dig in on any aspect of this, because I've got like 6 hours of presentations on all the things that we just try to speed run in like 50 minutes.
Perfect. Well, I think it's been great, and I'm sure we'll have you back to go deeper on some of those specific elements. Thanks for jumping on the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to Product Market Fit Show, and leave a review, please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover this show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing like great podcast or I love this podcast, whatever it is, just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.